This is Best Wrestling Podcast with your hosts, John McDonald and Matt Fitzgerald. And it begins now.
Powered by the Alberta Podcast Network and brought to you tonight by ATB Financial. It's Best Wrestling Podcast. I'm one half of your audio tag team champions, Jonathan McDonald. And with me as always, my partner in crime, the Shawn Michaels to my Marty Jannetty, Matt Fitzgerald. Matt, what's going on?
I really like how you gave me the Shawn Michaels in that combo. How nice of you, kind sir.
Hey, man, you deserve it.
Man, I'm excited to chat tonight. It feels like it's been too long since we got on the airwaves and we've cut some BWP.
Well, we're going to start right off with a woot change of heart that you have about a certain wrestler based on, I don't know, what was it, a podcast episode you listened to? Fill everybody in.
Yeah, so I guess for the millions and millions of fans listening, you might recall that I was a little bit grumpy about CM Punk. I don't like people that whine. I've never been a believer that the company screwed over Brett. But recently, I've been re-listening to Colt Cabana's podcast. Shout out to our brother over at Colt Cabana Podcast. I know that we listen to his show and he listens to ours. But it was interesting going back and listening to CM Punk's take on the whole story. I mean, it's been, 7 years now, something like that, maybe even longer. And I feel empathy for CM Punk. I think that the company did do him wrong. I think it was wrong for him to be put in a program with Brock and then job to Brock only for Brock to be gone the next day. Same with Taker, same with Rock. And so I can understand a lot of where Punk's frustration came from. Then they put him in the program with Ryback when Ryback was fresh. And he ended up hurting CM Punk. Vince put him in a TLC match right after he got his elbow surgery. And so I think that he was not treated fairly. And I wanted to say that I, like you so poetically said, Jonathan, I've had a change of heart.
Well, a couple things I want to interject with. First of all, CM Punk should have ended the streak. He was the right guy at 29.
Yep. Big time. Oh, I agree 100%. And he's right that he stole the show with those matches, like his match with Brock, for an example, or his match with Taker. His match with Taker, I felt should have went on last, and that's what people said to Punk when he came back through Gorilla. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, and then to the Brock Lesnar point, I mean, other than AJ Styles, no one has gotten a better match out of like the returning Brock Lesnar, the 2012 onward Brock Lesnar, than CM Punk, because that SummerSlam match was an absolute classic. I don't know if Punk should have went over there. Whatever. It was a smodgy finish and Paul Heyman got involved. But man, like you hit the nail on the head. CM Punk was busting his butt like in a Bruno Sammartino-esque schedule, defending the title like it seemed like every second night. And boy, he did not really get rewarded for all that he did.
No, and then they give him his basically fire him or give him his severance papers, however you want to look at it, because the guy did walk out, of course. But you got to think that it was done intentionally, and there was some mal intent, if you will, to send the guy those papers on his wedding day. I've seen Stone Cold Steve Austin's podcast where Vince says that essentially that was an accident. I don't believe it. Like, I think somebody did that on purpose as a jab. What do you think?
I'm totally with you on that. And another point I want to make about Punk and his championship reign is whenever they'd give something to CM Punk, they'd always, I don't know, take one step forward, two steps back type deal. So yeah, they gave him the WWE title, let him have a long run with it. But in every pay-per-view that he had the strap, he was not in the main event. We see things like John Cena versus Johnny Laurinaitis go on over it, or Cena versus Big Show Part 80 go on over it. So yeah, you got the title, but all of a sudden the title gets devalued. And then they would say things to him which are just ridiculous whenever he'd sort of complain. They'd say like, oh, you're wrestling The Undertaker, or you're going to wrestle Triple H. That's really the main event. Like, no, if it doesn't go on last, it's not the main event. So just silly things like that. I can totally see why they'd stick in his craw.
And especially like Punk's rebuttal to that was, well, if it was the main event, then pay me like it was the main event, but he didn't get paid out. So there you go. It's unfair. And it's just rude to say that it is, it's the co-main event. It's like, no, one match gets paid a lot bigger of a check than the other match. And so if it really is a co-main event, then pay them equally. But Jonathan, I want to just go back to something you just mentioned, because I don't remember this, but John Laurinaitis versus John Cena went on later in the program versus Punk's title match.
That's correct. Over the Limit 2012, when CM Punk and Daniel Bryan fought for the WWE title and tore the house down, as you'd expect. The main event was actually John Cena versus John Laurinaitis.
No.
Yes, sir. People power.
That match went on last. John Cena versus John Laurinaitis.
Cross my heart, hope to die.
How? How does that even make any sense? Like, why would that match go on last? John Laurinaitis can't even wrestle. He came out in like Under Armour gear. It was foolish.
Well, they have such little faith, I guess, in CM Punk as champion that John Cena versus anybody on planet Earth gets the main event over Punk with the title. So that's telling.
That's crazy. I had no idea that. It's so ludicrous that maybe in my brain I just I didn't even pick up on how crazy it was. But I mean, that's just sad.
Can I dive a little deeper and take it back to 2011? Obviously, everybody knows by now about the Punk pipe bomb, which just recently had its anniversary. I mean, for me, that was the first time since like the tail end of the Attitude Era when I saw people like in the mainstream talk about wrestling. Like, I think it was like CM Punk was on Jimmy Kimmel. I think like ESPN showed a picture of Punk with the title belt in his fridge. I remember wearing my CM Punk shirt at a Tim Hortons Canadian staple here in Edmonton. And someone was like, oh man, CM Punk shirt. That's so cool. And man, did they ever drop the ball with all the momentum they had coming out of that pipe bomb.
I know that's why I love professional wrestling so much, especially back then when you look at the way that it was in the Attitude Era. It was raw. It was real emotion. People were their characters, and you just lost that. And CM Punk's pipe bomb, I just felt was so real because that's how he was actually feeling, even though, of course, it was kayfabe because he was talking about how he's going to be taking the title and defending it. And so obviously there was that character of, CM Punk in it, but you could just tell like there was so much anger in his voice and all of that came from a real place that media picked it up. And when you have all these scripts and all these writers that just write for people like Roman Reigns and you say suffer and succotash, there's just no heart in it. And it doesn't fly.
Well, something that does have heart is our friends at ATB Financial. These people are transforming banking, Matt. They're reimagining it. They're making banking work for people. They care about people. They have this outrageous belief that banking can actually change people's lives and not just be about banks making profit. Now, they do this by doing things that other banks wouldn't do. They're loyal to their customers. They're relentlessly inventive. And they're steadfastly genuine in their pursuit of Albertans' greater good. So check them out. Once again, that's ATB Financial. Visit them on the World Wide Web at www.atb.com.
Do you think that ATB Financial is holding the money right now that belongs in Braun Strowman's Money in the Bank briefcase? And when he goes to cash it in, he needs to head up an ATB here, potentially in the Alberta region? I think it is.
Well, if we're going to ask questions about Braun, the real question is, in order to cash it in, is he going to have to go to UFC 230 and get Lesnar?
Oh, that's a good point. Is Brock Lesnar even coming back to the WWE? I noticed that I saw a Meltzer report, and Meltzer said that the whole point that he's not being advertised right now, because he wasn't even talked about on Raw, because they want the whole focus on Extreme Rules. And I heard that the strategy that Vince has is to really make people dislike Brock, which I think is working, because even I'm a huge Brock fan, and even at this point, I'm like, you know what, this whole Brock thing now, it's got to be done. But Vince's plan is to have the WWE universe dislike Brock so much that in turn it gets over Roman Reigns. Jonathan, is that a smart strategy?
Wasn't this what happened in the build up to WrestleMania? Like, didn't we already do this?
We 100% already did this. The build up for our friends listening at home or on their drive or walking their dog or walking themselves. What happened in the build up to WrestleMania was Brock was no-showing events, and of course he wasn't a fighting champion, and that was supposed to get Roman over. Both of them came out to the ring. It was basically Bootista, except for Brock and Roman. The whole thing was a disaster, and so somehow I guess Vince thinks that he's just going to be able to now pull it off for SummerSlam, which I think, man, I think if I was to bet, I would say if it's Brock versus Roman at SummerSlam for the strap, they both come out, they both get booed. It's WrestleMania finish all over again.
Well, I am totally in agreement with all that. One thing I wanted to bring up from the Meltzer man himself was this interesting tidbit I saw on Reddit, which said that according to the latest issue of Wrestling Observer, Meltzer reports that Cody Rhodes tried to have All In at the Staples Center in Los Angeles, and the Staples Center officials told him, "Look, pal, we don't want no wrestling. That ain't Vince McMahon's WWE. Scram." So they wanted nothing to do with a non-WWE wrestling event.
Really? And why is that?
Well, I think that they severely underestimated the scope of this. I think once they see All In, or if they haven't read about the ticket sales already, they will be kicking themselves. What an opportunity. They could have easily crammed the full 22,000 into that house.
So why did Cody Rhodes go with Chicago?
Let's see. Chicago's a great wrestling town.
Okay.
CM Punk, rumor and innuendo would definitely build some intrigue.
Yep.
And go ahead.
Oh, is that it? Is there any other kind of, lineage to the program in Chicago, or is it just a great place to have it?
No, I can't think of anything off the top of my head. What about you? Any ideas?
Yeah, I think that the whole CM Punk thing can definitely have some roots. I'm just curious, why wouldn't they put it in Madison Square Garden and give a big FU to Vinnie Mac? Or is Madison Square Garden like in bed with Vinnie Mac too?
Well, that or like even the WWE can barely run MSG these days because the union fees you have to pay when you run that building are astronomical. So WWE will run like one non-televised house show there each year. Other than that, they've been really scaling down how many times they run it.
What do you mean? Explain.
Well, like the union workers that you have to use when you rent the building, like the vendors, like the janitors, like the people who set up the bleachers and the ring, you have to use MSG's union peeps, and they are astronomically expensive. So
really?
Yep.
Oh, I didn't know that at all. So, hey, listen, speaking of MSG, I know that we were chatting offline the other day, John, and you mentioned that Dana White putting UFC 230 potentially with Brock on the card is a big middle finger to Vinnie Mac. Do you still feel that way?
Yeah, I still view it that way because I think that if Dana White is willing to pay those aforementioned fees, and he's got one of Vince's, if not Vince's top guy, and he's in Vince's bill, I mean, how many things do you have to point to before you start to believe, yeah, okay, I think this is a not so subtle jab at Vinnie Mac.
Interesting. I like that. I like the controversy. Controversy creates cash. I also want to, Jonathan, pick your brain on a special WrestleMania here in a little bit. Maybe you know what WrestleMania I'm talking about. I'll give you a hint. It's the best WrestleMania of all time. And the reason I bring it up is because we were chatting as well. I was watching it on the network the other day. And actually, Jonathan, speaking of networks, do you know what other network I just absolutely adore lately?
What's that, my friend?
That would be the Alberta Podcast Network. And so for all of our friends listening, you might know this already, of course. We've been making a lot of hype. We are on the Alberta Podcast Network, and you'll want to check it out. Go to albertapodcastnetwork.com, and you can go and check out our new friends, their podcast. It is an incredible, incredible network full of incredible content. Let's chat about one of our favorites that we've been diving into recently. That's called the Networker's Quest. Those guys over there and gals, they interview entrepreneurs. They're able to pick their brain, and they talk about how these entrepreneurs create success. Some really awesome content. So you want to check out them and other podcasters on the Alberta Podcast Network. It's powered by ATB Financial. But Jonathan, I was watching the WWE Network, and I was watching WrestleMania X7, and I think Paul Heyman is undercredited for his commentating work. What do you think?
Oh, look, anytime I get an opportunity to put over Paul Heyman in any fashion, I'm going to take it. One thing that I had said to you, a couple of days ago when we were chatting is how fortunate are we that the stars aligned for Paul Heyman to be involved with WrestleMania X7 at the announcing table. Because Jerry Lawler, if you recall, he only had left at the pay-per-view before No Way Out in February. And by the time November had come around that year, he was back. So in that small window, thankfully, by miracle, one of the greatest color commentators ever got the opportunity to call the greatest pay-per-view ever. So that's awesome.
And what was the cool reference that you were telling me about the back and forth between JR and Paul during the Austin Rock match?
Well, just a little background and context, just finished the audio version of JR's book and actually recommend it more than the actual book itself because, anytime you can hear JR talk, it's awesome. And he'll do his impressions and ramp it up when need be. But one part of the book is about him developing his friendship with Paul Heyman. They go way back to the late 80s in WCW. and they developed a rapport at the announce table there. And they basically had this unspoken agreement. Look, we're great pals, but give it to me at the announce table and I'll give it back to you. Let the hatred flow. Let's do it. And so at WrestleMania X7 in your beloved baby, the main event, Rock and Austin, there's just this awesome exchange where Stone Cold is gaining the upper hand and Jim Ross says something to the effect of, and Austin gains the upper hand. He's perhaps going to win the WWF championship. And Paul Heyman goes, oh, and wouldn't you just love that? Your best friend, Stone Cold, winning the title. And then Jim Ross snaps back, well, what do you care if he's my friend? And it's just so awesome because, I mean, it captures everything. Everybody knows that Jim Ross is like an Austin guy, trying probably to hide his bias. Paul Heyman just calls him out for it. Jim Ross snaps back. Oh, I just loved it so much.
Yeah, I know. It was so good because I felt it blurred the lines between what is a work and what is a shoot, essentially, because they would get so heated that I actually believe, like, do these guys really have beef? Like, is this all?
Growing up, I had that VHS, and God knows I wore it out, and I thought that Jim Ross was annoyed. This is how I felt as a kid. I felt that Jim Ross was annoyed that Jerry the King Lawler was gone, and he had to work with Paul Heyman. Like, obviously, I had no idea about the reality, but I really felt that way.
100%. Like, I felt like he was bitter, and that he didn't want anything to do with Paul, and that he just felt Paul was obnoxious and kind of egotistical and disgusting, and he didn't want any part of it. But they were forced to work together, and I felt that everything that they talked about came off. Versus sometimes with Jerry and the King, you could tell that it was a little bit of poking fun and some semantics, but not so much with Paul E. Dangerously, who I think is a bit of an unsung hero and deserves more credit for the industry as a whole.
Absolutely, brother. There's only one two-man group that's better on the microphone, and that's us at Best Wrestling Podcast. Now, I want to take an opportunity here at the close of the show, Matt, to let people know who perhaps haven't listened to us yet that they can find us on social media. We're on Twitter at Real BW Podcasts, and we're always live tweeting Raw, SmackDowns, NXTs, takeovers, and pay-per-views. And you, as always, are killing it on Instagram with awesome daily content. And the Instagram is Best Wrestling Podcast. And as well, you want to find our podcast, we're available wherever you get your wrestling content. So that includes iTunes, Google Play, Podbean, and Stitcher. And if we could be so kind as to ask listeners new and old who perhaps haven't subscribed or given us a review or rating yet, please, if you could do it, as it is so, so helpful to the show. I want to once again thank the awesome duo of ATB Financial and the Alberta Podcast Network for powering this episode. So we're going to shut things down and give the old go home cue for now, but we'll be back. Best Wrestling Podcast has only just begun.